Mac had always been drawn to the solitude of the old mansion. It stood on a windswept hill overlooking the town, a monument to forgotten grandeur. Its empty halls echoed with the weight of time, the silence broken only by the creak of floorboards and the rustling of leaves against the grimy windows. Mac found a strange comfort in this isolation, a sanctuary from the clamor of the world. He spent his days exploring the mansion's dusty rooms, each one a vignette frozen in time. He dined alone in the cavernous dining room, the only sound the clinking of silverware against china. At night, he'd sit by the fireplace in the grand library, a single lamp illuminating the worn spines of countless forgotten books. He was a ghost in his own haunted house, content in his quiet world. One afternoon, while exploring the mansion's upper floors, Max stumbled upon a door he'd never noticed before. It was tucked away at the end of a narrow hallway, almost invisible in the dim light. The door was unpainted, its surface rough to the touch. It stood slightly ajar, a black rectangle promising something unseen. Curiosity piqued, Mac pushed it open. The room beyond was small and windowless, barely large enough to hold a twin bed and a single dresser. The air hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of dust and decay. A single bare bulb cast a sickly yellow light, revealing walls painted a depressing shade of grey. A strange unease settled over Mac, a primal instinct telling him to turn back. Despite the unsettling feeling, Mac found himself drawn into the room. He spent what felt like hours inside, examining the bare walls, the dusty floorboards, the strange emptiness of it all. He found nothing to explain its peculiar aura. Eventually the shadows grew long, and Mac decided to call it a night. He retreated to his usual room, the master bedroom at the end of the hallway, and fell into a dreamless sleep. When he woke, the sun was streaming through the window, painting the familiar room in a warm glow. Mac went through his usual morning routine, a comforting rhythm in the stillness of the mansion. It was only when he was halfway down the stairs that he realized something was off. At first, Mac dismissed it as a fluke. He wound the clock himself, setting it to the correct time. The rest of the day passed without incident. He explored the mansion's grounds, ate a solitary lunch in the sunroom, and lost himself in a book from the library. Yet a nagging unease lingered in the back of his mind. That night, sleep came reluctantly. When he woke, the sun was streaming through the window, painting the familiar room in a warm glow. The grandfather clock in the foyer read 8 o'clock in the morning, ticking steadily. Disbelief gave way to a chilling certainty. He was reliving yesterday. The realization hit Mac with the force of a physical blow. He spent the day in a daze, retracing his steps, repeating his actions, waiting for something to change. But everything was the same. The same creaking floorboards, the same dust motes dancing in the sunlight, the same unsettling emptiness in the air. Yet, subtle discrepancies began to appear. Whispers of wrongness in the familiar fabric of his routine. A book he could have sworn he'd left open on the table was now closed. A vase he always kept on the mantelpiece was missing. His reflection in the dusty mirror seemed, well, off. A subtle distortion in the curve of his lips. Each loop brought new inconsistencies, each one chipping away at Mac's sanity. He became obsessed with the windowless room, convinced it held the key to the time loop. He spent hours inside, scrutinizing every inch, searching for any clue, any explanation. The room seemed to resist his attempts to define it. The dim lighting remained constant, regardless of the time of day. The angles of the walls seemed to shift subtly, defying any attempt at measurement. A faint ticking sound permeated the room, rhythmic and constant like the beating of a giant heart. Mac's mental state deteriorated with each passing loop. Sleep became impossible, his nights plagued by nightmares and cold sweats. The lack of rest etched lines on his face, his eyes becoming bloodshot and wild. The fear morphed into a desperate need for answers. He began meticulously documenting the changes, trying to find a pattern in the chaos. He filled notebooks with frantic scribbles, diagrams of the room, lists of every discrepancy, every flicker of wrongness. His handwriting grew wilder with each passing loop, a physical manifestation of his unraveling sanity. He was a prisoner in his own mind, trapped in a repeating nightmare with no escape. Obsessed, Mac tried everything to break free. He tried leaving the mansion only to find himself inexplicably back in his bed the next morning, the clock ticking away the same stolen hours. He tried destroying parts of the mansion, convinced that if he could just alter its structure, he could disrupt the loop. Each attempt was met with the same chilling reset. The fear was a living thing now, a constant presence in his mind. The once comforting silence of the mansion became oppressive, every creak and groan a whispered threat. The 10th loop arrived like a spectre. The air hung heavy with a sense of dread, a premonition of something terrible. The changes were more pronounced now, the discrepancies bolder. Furniture was overturned, paintings askew, as if a struggle had taken place in his absence. The ticking in the windowless room grew louder, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. As Max stood in the center of the room, his heart pounding in his chest, he saw him. Standing in the far corner, bathed in the sickly yellow light, was another version of himself. The figure was identical to Mac in every way. Same worn clothes, same unkempt hair, same look of terror etched on his face. And yet there was something different, something profoundly unsettling about his doppelganger. It was in the way he stood, the subtle tilt of his head, the chillingly familiar smile that played on his lips. The double blinked, his eyes meeting Mac's across the room. In that instant, Mac realized he wasn't looking at a reflection, but something else entirely, something that had been waiting for him. "Hello," the double said, his voice a distorted echo of Mac's own. Terror choked Mac's voice. He stumbled back, desperate to escape the room, the mansion, the crushing weight of the repeating day. But the door was gone, the walls closing in, trapping him with his smiling tormentor. The double took a step toward him, and Mac felt a pull, a force dragging him forward. He thrashed, but it was no use. He was being pulled toward his double, drawn into his embrace, consumed by his own reflection. When Mac opened his eyes, the sun was streaming through the window, painting the familiar room in a warm glow. He lay in bed for a moment, the remnants of a nightmare clinging to the edges of his mind. He could almost feel the weight of the repeating days, the crushing despair of the time loop. He got out of bed and went through his usual morning routine. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he glanced at the grandfather clock. It read 8 o'clock, ticking steadily. He paused, a flicker of unease in his chest. He pushed open the door to the windowless room. It was empty. He stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was different, that something had changed. He ran his hand over the rough surface of the wall, feeling a strange tingling sensation in his fingertips. He looked down at his hand, turning it over and over in the dim light. It was his hand, and yet it wasn't. It was the same, but subtly altered, the fingers slightly longer, the skin a shade paler. And then he saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible mark on the back of his hand. A single chilling word etched into his skin. 10.